Hey, you. Yeah, you. Have you been thinking about starting a podcast? It seems like a new one pops up every day. If you're wanting to get started, there's no easier way than Spotify for podcasters. Well, why do you say that, Steve? Good question, Steve. Let me tell you. Spotify has a platform that allows you to create your podcast and distribute it everywhere, and even earn money. Well, that sounds expensive. Not so, alter ego Steve. Spotify for podcasters is absolutely free. You can create and edit from your phone or computer. So no matter your setup, you can start creating immediately. You can even create video podcasts. Well, how hard is it to use? We're using it right now. We are? Yeah. I've been using Spotify for podcasters to host and create Movable Dough for years now and have been very happy with the results. Well, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Spotify for podcasters, the easiest way to create and host a podcast.
Welcome to Moveable Dough. This is Steve Danielson. Each week on Moveable Dough, I sit down with a composer to talk about their lives, their musical journeys, and, of course, their music. Come with me as we explore each unique path into composition and what they have to share with the world. For a complete archive of episodes, as well as access to the shorter segments called Movable Snippets, visit my website, sdcompose.com/movabledough. Hey, this is Steve. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Moveable Dough. My guest today is Garrett Breeze. Garrett is a composer, arranger, and orchestrator whose credits include film, television, video games, Broadway stars, major classical artists, and many of the top school music programs in the U.S. Garrett holds a bachelor's degree in media music from Brigham Young University and a master's degree in commercial composition and arranging from Belmont University. He is the author of Teaching Arranging in the Choral Classroom and host of the podcast Selling Sheet Music. Garrett Breeze, welcome to Moveable Dough.
Thanks for having me.
So, Garrett, I know you currently live in Nashville, but I don't believe that you grew up there. So where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay.
So that's where I got my start musically. I'm really a product of music education. You know, I wasn't really exposed to it other than piano lessons until I got into the 6th grade and started doing band. And then from there, I just sort of got sucked into everything. You know, by the time I graduated, I was a trombone player. You know, by the time I graduated, I was doing choir and orchestra and band and jazz band. And, you know, and I remember my senior year, you know, the guidance counselor was looking at my schedule going, well, I guess there's no reason why you can't have 5 music classes in your day. Like, you know, you're going to graduate, so I guess go for it, you know? So that's really, you know, where I cut my teeth, I suppose. And then I started arranging for my alma mater, high school in Indianapolis. And things kind of snowballed from there, you know, because my teacher would have a student teacher who'd go get a job somewhere else, and then they'd need an arranger, and then they'd, you know, go to a different school, or somebody else would see it. And it just kind of, it was this kind of word of mouth thing that happened that was really cool.
Oh, that's very cool. Was your family musical as well? Were they all doing the same sort of thing as you?
No, that's kind of the funny thing. I mean, I guess the genes were there. My mom and my grandma are both musical, but I didn't come from any sort of professional music background or anything like that.
That's cool. So you started arranging for your high school. Was that while you were in high school, or was that after?
Yeah, I mean, so I started doing it as a high school student just because I'm, you know, the overachieving type. And then I kept doing it on the side when I went to college. I went to Brigham Young University for my undergrad. And so I was working, actually my on-campus job was with the BYU Young Ambassadors. So I was doing their charts and like assisting with the show band. And then at the same time, I was sort of moonlighting, writing these show choir charts for high schools back east. And you know, the original life plan was that I was going to move to LA and be a film composer. And then at some point I just kind of went, I kind of want to give this arranging thing a go. I really liked the fact that I was working on something different every day, you know, and running on my own schedule. And it was never something I would have assumed possible starting out. But by the time, by the time I got through grad school, I had a pretty sizable business going.
That's very cool. So what was it about show choir that sort of drew you in?
Well, I think it's just the fact that you're combining the visual and musical elements. You've got the choreography, you've got the lights and the sound and the production, and there's just all these different pieces that come together. And it's really a unique and cool thing. And unfortunately, it's only really popular or prevalent in certain pockets of the country.
Uh-huh.
It's really big in the Midwest, a few spots on the East Coast and the South, a little pocket in Southern California, but that's about it, at least in terms of competitive show choir.
Sure.
But I like being able to put my own spin on things, because I get asked to do a lot of arrangements of popular music, and they want me to be creative with it and do something different and unexpected, or mash it up with this or that. So I don't know. I just figured out early on that I didn't really care what I was writing for as long as it was getting sung, or performed. And
Yeah.
I didn't it didn't matter to me if it was a trombone quartet or a Beyonce arrangement for a choir or an original, like quote unquote serious piece of music. I enjoy doing all of it.
So I know when you're arranging a piece, you've got to get rights from the copyright holder. Did it take you a while to figure out how to navigate that field? How easy is that, or how difficult?
Well, when I started in show choir, there was already sort of a how should we put this, ongoing debate and discussion about that just within the industry. There a lot of the publishers had basically discovered YouTube and realized that everybody was singing their music, and so they had started coming in and saying, like, this is what you need to do. So I guess I was fortunate in that sense that I was told that I needed to get licensing. I didn't have to figure it out myself. The hardest part about it, though, is really just getting rights holders to answer their email. Because if you're a big publisher for a major artist, you don't have any idea what show choir is, and the $200 license fee is not really worth the time for you to answer the email. and that's the frustrating part. More often than not, people are fine with it if you can ever get a hold of them.
Uh-huh.
It's just that process of explaining, like, this is what it is, and it's for high school kids and blah blah blah. It doesn't sort of fit into the neat categories of sync licensing or mechanical licensing. It's kind of its own thing because it's educational, but it's also being professionally arranged. It's kind of this weird in between, but for the most part, I think publishers just want money, so they're all for it.
Yeah. So when you and I were talking earlier this year at the ACDA convention, you talked about how your work with show choirs is akin to writing like a marching band show. So you're like crafting whole shows for choirs. How many of these do you do per year?
Yeah, I mean, I that's kind of my go-to for explaining it to people that have never experienced it before. It's kind of like DCI for choir kids. You put together a 15 to 20 minute set of music, and a lot of times it's themed, or it has a story behind it, or sometimes it's just picking good music. But yeah, I probably have about 20 or so shows that I do every year, just for my sort of core group of clients, and then I'll do one-off charts for a bunch of different groups. That's all over the place in terms of year to year what comes my way, and a lot of that has to do, frankly, with just the teacher carousel, and every year people are switching jobs and moving here and there and bringing their team with them, and so
Right.
it's a really great community to be a part of. I mean, the show choir community, it's a really tight-knit group, and it's really supportive, and it's really just a good environment to be part of. So if you're on the fence about show choir, if you're listening, you should definitely do it.
So you mentioned that there are sort of these pockets of competitive show choir. Are your clients from one pocket more than the other?
Yes, I would say primarily the Indianapolis area, Indiana, Ohio, that sort of area where I grew up. That's where I have the most personal connections, just from people I went to school with or friends of friends or that sort of thing. But really, it's more about the relationships with the choreographers. I've kind of found the choreographers that I work the best with, and I tend to just sort of, hang on to their coattails as they go from school to school and just, work for whoever they're working with. Because that really helps with the creative process. I mean, you can't do something like this. Just like if you were scoring a film, you couldn't do it without talking to the director. You can't write something for dance if you're not going to be communicating and have a good relationship with the choreographer, because there's just
Yeah.
different things you have to consider that you wouldn't normally have to think about.
Like what?
Well, for example, how I mean, just sort of the logistics of like how hard are they dancing? If they're going to be moving on every 8 count, and then they have this like complicated syncopated rhythm, or maybe it's a divisi. There's certain spots where divisi wouldn't work because they're doing a spin move or something. You know what I mean? And so you wouldn't want
Uh-huh.
them to be, you wouldn't want the sopranos to be holding out a high F and then twirling. It would do weird things to the sound. Or if they're transitioning from this picture to this picture, and half the choir is facing sideways because they're walking. So I mean, I guess it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing, because I write the music first. So if they choreograph to the music, then it fits. But there's a lot of back and forth and just talking about what we want to do. And
Yeah.
this is going to be a big dance moment, so keep it simple here. Or this is going to be just sort of a stand and sing moment, so it can be really hard or really impressive. And um, it's
That's all. Yeah.
I'm probably overthinking it, but
No, I think
that's
that's great. It's a
that's
world
the
that
kind of
I
stuff.
don't usually live in, so I think that's awesome. So what eventually landed you in Nashville?
So I came for the master's program at Belmont. That
And
was
then
that
just
was sort of
stuck
the
around afterwards?
yeah. We just never bothered leaving. That's kind of the I mean, if you're not in education, you're the only way to make a living as a musician is to be a freelancer, and that's what I've been my whole career. And one of the, I guess it's the blessing and the curse of being a freelancer, is you don't have a employer or a boss telling you where you have to live. And so I mean, we could throw a dart at the map and move tomorrow, and I'd still have my same stable of clients. So, but we just found we really liked the area, um, and we enjoyed the people that we live with, and our friends, and our just community. And we've just my wife and I we really enjoyed starting our family here.
All right. Well, I've got to address the elephant in the podcast, that we are both podcasters. So you host the show Selling Sheet Music, and it's
That's
aimed
right.
mostly, though not entirely, at self-published composers. You're coming up on a year of doing the show, so tell us about the podcast. What's your aim?
Yeah, so I just see um, a lot of things changing in the world of music publishing that I did not feel like were being talked about. I mean, you certainly have programs like Arrange Me and MyScore that a lot of composers are probably familiar with. Those are self-publishing platforms that Hal Leonard and J.W. Pepper have, that let you upload your music and sell it, to anyone in the world. But I just think, well, put it this way. I think it's very comparable to what's happened with streaming recorded music and Spotify. Anyone and their mom can go in their bedroom with their laptop and record an album and use DistroKid or CD Baby or some other service like that, and get it on streamers and become an independent recording artist. It doesn't take a lot of expense. Like the tools to do that are readily available. And the same thing is happening in the world of sheet music. If you are familiar with notation software, you can create the scores and engrave the scores, and you can print them as PDFs, and you can put them on your website. You can put them on a service like MyScore or Arrange Me, and you can get your music out in front of the world. You can put videos on YouTube. You can become a publisher, all on your own. And so I think that aspect of just where the technology's gone, combined with just how easy it is, to download and print a PDF. I mean, it's changing how people are buying music.
Yeah. Yeah, I've listened to a couple of your episodes. Great tools and and tips for self-published composers, which I think is fantastic. Where do you see it going in the future?
I only see it growing. I think, I mean, there's certainly pros and cons to working with traditional publishers. I don't think traditional publishers are going away, but I do think that those traditional publishers, I think, are going to be more and more focused on specific markets. How Leonard has their educational series, like that's never going to go away because that's a well-established brand. It's an amazing product. They have that system dialed in, right? But there's other types of music. I think well, for one thing, I think there's an interest in singing different styles of music. There's interest in having more representation in music. I think this is one of the ways, we balance out the need to hear different voices in music composition. Any race or sexual orientation or gender can upload their music and be found online just as any composer. The need for the need for the gatekeepers to sort of determine that, I think, is becoming less and less. So I guess what I see happening is more and more people kind of finding their niche, both as composers and as conductors. I think a lot of choirs tend to sing certain styles of music, and I think they'll find where to go to get that, and that might be a combination of this independent composer over here and this publisher here, and people just have their go-tos. And so I think the overall market is going to increase because you're going to have more music out there, but I also think you're not going to have the like mega stars in the same way that you had 20 years ago with Eric Whitacre, and everyone in the world was singing his pieces. I mean, you might still have that, but I think if you look at what's happened with recorded music, it's sort of fragmented. You have smaller groups of really devoted listeners that are really fans of a particular artist.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to turn to talk about your ebook, Teaching Arranging in the Choral Classroom. So you make this available for free on your website.
That's right.
I read through it. I don't want to give everything away because I think our listeners should go check it out and download it themselves. But I would like to touch on just the first lesson in the book, the one thing that all music has in common. So what is that one thing, and how does that help choral conductors teach arranging?
Well, the one thing is the fact that it's arranged. I guess the other elephant in the room is that this is a podcast about composers, and I'm primarily an arranger. But the way I look at it, arranging is just a step in the composition process. Either you have if you're a composer, you are creating the melodic material yourself and then going on to arrange it. Whereas if you're being hired to do an arrangement of something, the source material is already there for you to draw from. But in terms of creating an arrangement yourself, there's really two ways of doing it. There's sort of the what I call the transcriptive arranging, which is when you're trying to keep things as close to the original material as possible, right? So if you wanted to sing something from Hamilton, right, but you have a choir instead of a single soloist, so really you're not changing much about the piece other than to add those harmonies, and maybe you got to change the key to fit it for your singers' voices or something like that. But generally speaking, you're keeping things sort of the same. And then I contrast that with what I call transformative arranging, that's sort of the postmodern jukebox, right? You take a song and put it in a completely new context. You take a pop song and you make it a swing tune, or you take something with accompaniment and you make it a cappella, and you're being really creative with how you put that together and putting your spin on it, and you're really making a new piece of music out of it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's great. I've done several things like that with my own choirs, and I think any choral conductor should do it.
And I guess I'll just say too, one of the main points that I wanted to get across with writing that course is the fact that you don't need to have a complete grasp on music theory or music notation to be able to do it. Like we tend to think of arranging as the written piece of music, and that's certainly how I do things. That's how my brain works. But I don't want to discount other ways of creating music. There's a lot of, especially in Nashville, there's a lot of really talented musicians that just go into the studio and make stuff up on the spot and record it. A lot of times I get asked to transcribe after recording sessions, like, here's what we just did. Can you write it down? Like, can you figure out what we just did? So you may have, and my pilot group for this course was actually a middle school choir, so you don't have to, my point is, you don't have to wait until you get to college to start teaching arranging, because if you do that, you're missing a huge segment of the student population that would probably be interested in it.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm starting a new high school position this fall and excited to see what I can do with them.
Me
All
too.
right.
I'd love to hear it.
So, thinking back, what is one of the most memorable performances of one of your pieces? Something that you look back on with fondness?
Memorable performance. Well, the sad part is I don't usually get to go to these. So, I mean, truthfully, most of the time I'm just sending off the PDF, and then, if I'm lucky, I get to see a recording of it later. But I do have to, I will be sentimental here for a little bit and just say that, when my sister was a senior in high school, we did a whole Christmas album for her choir. Me and the director, we wrote an album of Christmas music and recorded it. And so it was really fun to be able to go in the studio with her and with the choir. If you ever get the chance to take your choir into a recording studio, it's a really neat educational opportunity. But that was just really fun to have that personal connection, with her and with the other, with the program that I had been a part of.
That's awesome. So, Garrett, I know you're a freelance composer, arranger. What do you do to relax when you're not doing music? What do you do after a stressful day?
Well, right now it's Tears of the Kingdom, the new Zelda game. I mean, there's not much relaxing, to be truthful. I've got 3 kids under the age of 8, so I enjoy playing with them and doing things with them, but I don't know that I would call it relaxing.
Kids have their own level of relaxation.
For sure. No, but yeah, I mean, you're asking a very reasonable question. I gave you a sort of flippant answer, but yeah, no, I enjoy playing video games. I enjoy being outdoors, going kayaking, disc golf, that sort of thing. Spending time with my family, watching TV, just vegging. It's funny. I don't listen to a lot of music for fun. Because by the time I, reach the end of the day, my brain is so overstimulated. It's like the last thing I want to do is hear more music. So a lot of times, I'll listen to podcasts or I'll do something specifically because it's not musical and my brain just needs a break.
It sounds very similar to what I just told my students the other day. They asked me the same thing. What kind of music do you listen to? I don't listen to a lot. I just need a break sometimes. All right. Well, speaking of breaks, after we take a quick break, we're going to listen to some of Garrett's compositions. Welcome back. This is Steve Danielson, and I'm talking today with Garrett Breeze. So we're going to start today with There's a Green Hill Far Away for SATB piano or strings. There's a beautiful setting of one of my favorite hymns, but set in 5/4 instead of the normal 4/4. So tell us about writing this arrangement and why you chose to use 5/4.
Yeah, so it started out as a request from the BYU Young Ambassadors. They wanted a new piece to sing on their Fireside program. They're a show Broadway type group, and they go on tour. And on Sundays and at other times throughout the tour, they'll go to local churches and sing a program. And so they wanted some new music for that. And I had always really loved the text to that hymn, but as I started arranging it, it just felt very square. The way that the melody was structured was very, on the beat, da 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 da, and it just kept sounding too, I don't know, militaristic or march-like, or I don't know. There was just something about it that I was struggling with, and I remember this was one of those lightning bolt moments. I was just walking on campus one day, and then I realized, like, what if we change the time signature, and that just gives it a little more room to breathe. You can kind of stretch and it has this sort of push and pull that it adds to all, to every phrase that really, I think, makes you think about the words differently and express, the melodic line a little differently than I think you would just in the regular strict 4/4 meter. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. I mean, it really turned out great. And then this past year, I just decided I wanted to have orchestra with it. So I had a professional choir coming into the studio to record a Christmas EP, actually, that'll be coming out this year. And so I just threw this on the session because I wanted to.
Well, I think it's great. And the thing that I love about it is, it doesn't feel off kilter because it's 5/4. You're expecting 4/4 from There's a Green Hill Far Away, but like you said, it feels like it's breathing more. It just feels more relaxed almost.
Well, to me, it feels more like an uneven 2. I don't think when you're conducting it, I don't know that it makes sense necessarily to be constantly beating out the quarter note, but it's sort of like my middle school band director always talked about those taffy machines, that like they have the 2 arms and they sort of pull and stretch the toffee. It's kind of like that, just like the arms are constantly spinning. It never really settles in one place because it's always going to the next thing or coming back from it. And I think something else that helps with too is just, I think sometimes hymn arrangements can get stuck in this rut of like, this is what we're doing for the first verse, and this is what we're doing for the second verse, and you know what I mean. And it can be very strophic, and I guess I do that too in the arrangement because each verse is set pretty differently from the rest. But I think it just feels more connected because you never really stop and rest anywhere, and so I think it helps sort of counteract that sort of I guess like relentless structure that you sometimes get when you arrange hymns, and you have one melody and it's repeated 4 times and that's basically it.
All right. Well, we are now going to listen to There's a Green Hill Far Away. All right, our next piece today, The Place Where Lost Things Go. This is an arrangement from Mary Poppins Returns for SATB, piano, and violin. So when you sit down to work on an arrangement like this, what sort of choices are you considering in your process?
Well, and for me, it's all about the structure of the piece. And it's figuring about it's more so than that. It's figuring out where the sort of money moments are. What are the
Mm-hmm.
spots that are the most important? What are we building towards? And so for something like this, that really just meant digging into the text and figuring out which lines were the most meaningful. And I try really hard, and I think I succeeded in this piece. I try really hard to make sure that the kinds of vocal flourishes and effects and things like that make sense with what the text is saying. I mean, not necessarily word painting, but just sort of, I don't know, emotional painting, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And so, and I get asked to do a lot of pieces like this where a choir wants to sing a popular song, but they want it to feel like a quote unquote legit piece of choral music, right? And
Right.
so it's also figuring out like what is it from this song that really works for choir. And so for me, for The Place Where Lost Things Go, a lot of that came down to just the feel and the piano accompaniment and figuring out how to set that piano part and then adding the violin and then from there that kind of set the mood and so you kind of take that you kind of take the vibe that the accompaniment sets up and you look at the text and then from there you're sort of piecing together. I mean, I don't want to give the wrong impression. I am not one of those composers that sits down and has everything mapped out and structured before they start writing. I'm very much, I mean, I need to do a really bad draft first and then step away for a couple of days and then come back and kind of tweak it and then go sleep on it and come back and rework it. I mean, I wish I could say that I was, but I'm just not one of those guys where I see it and it just sort of comes out fully formed. It's very much a process of trial and error. And even in this case, this was a commission for Andrew Crane at BYU, and my first draft was pretty safe, to be honest, because I'd never worked with him before.
Uh-huh.
And he basically came back and said, this is the right idea, but you've got a professional grade choir here, like go for it, and so then because I didn't want to overdo it with the DVC and that sort of thing, I didn't want to make it too show choir, right? So where was I going with this? Yeah, so I guess, but it was also a process of figuring out like what Andrew wanted and what was right for the choir. And we went back and forth probably 7 or 8 times. I mean, I know there are composers that don't do that, but I think, if somebody's paying you for a piece of music, they should get what they're after, And
Yeah.
so Dr. Crane's, his influence is all over this as well, because he would come back and with, really specific, I think when you're working with the composer, I guarantee they have thought of every possible way to write what they've written. And so if you have a suggestion or a feedback or something you want changed, I think it's beneficial for everyone to be as specific as you can. He didn't come back and say, I don't like this, try again. It was very specific, like, let's have the basses do this, or what do you think about the piano part voicing it this way? It was very specific to like this chord or this line or this part.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good collaboration. All right. Well, we are going to listen to The Place Where Lost Things Go, here performed by the BYU Singers with Dr. Andrew Crane, conductor. All right, our third piece today, Sing Loud for SAB choir and piano. So this piece falls into your catalog of show choir music, a world, as I've admitted, I'm pretty ignorant of. So we've talked about your choices in the last piece, but are there other things you had to take into account when working for show choir? I know you talked about choreography. Are you picturing the choir singing it in your mind as you write?
Definitely. I think I mean, I'm not very good at predicting what a choreographer is going to do, but what I try to do is give them rhythms that will be helpful. So accompaniment patterns, or maybe hits in the accompaniment, or natural like breaks in the line. Just I try to give them something to choreograph to, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
This was a commission for a middle school in Iowa. And so they wanted something that they could bring their 7th and their 8th grade choirs together and do sort of the, the final number on the concert. So
Okay.
I don't know that they actually performed it with choreography, but what they were asking for was something in that sort of, pink zebra, danceable,
Sure.
like they have a lot of kids in their show choir program. So it sort of straddles the line, right? Like you could stand and sing it and it would be just sort of a fun, light, pop moment, but you could also definitely put choreography to it. I think the thing about that too, one of the things that makes show choir arranging different is just the attention span for repetition is not necessarily there. Like a lot of those arrangements tend to be shorter, and you almost never repeat something verbatim.
Hmm.
Because when you're doing it in the context of like a 15-minute show, I don't know, it just hits different with an audience, whereas if you compare it to a concert where you're going to sing a piece and then talk about the piece and then reset and then sing another piece. You know what I mean? You sort of take in everything as a whole. And so when you're writing a show choir show, one of the things you have to think about is kind of what, the song that came before and the song that came after, and how does everything fit together and flow and connect as a whole. So having said that, this piece was not part of a larger show, but I try to never repeat anything exactly the same. So yes, the piano part may be the same from verse to verse, but if you look at the vocal parts, they're doing something different when that second verse comes around, or when the chorus comes around, then there's that second chorus has more stuff in the instrumentation, and just trying to put as much variety into it as you can.
Yeah. Now, I know this arrangement that we're about to hear does not just have piano. It's got guitar, drums, bass, etc. So do you do the orchestration for those as well?
Yes, I do. And actually, this one is not an arrangement. It's just an original song.
Oh, awesome.
Composition, I think, and songwriting have a lot in common, but they have a different vocabulary for everything. Whereas a composer might call something A, B, a songwriter would call it, verse, chorus. And so there's definitely sort of tools from both worlds that I draw from when I'm creating a new piece. But yeah, so the accompaniment, I started with the piano, and then from there, the next thing I did was the drum part, just to figure out what that basic groove is. And then, the bass and the guitar, like when you're having that recorded, you don't really need to put much thought into it, because you can hand the guys the chord chart, and they do the work for you. But in that sense, it's more like producing, right? And that's, I think, what's so fun about what I do is I wear all sorts of different hats. There's some days where I'm composing stuff from scratch. There's some days where I'm writing song lyrics and creating new music that way. There's some days I'm more of a producer, and sometimes you have to kind of do everything at once.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we are going to listen to Sing Loud.
Someone follow you. Whoa, whoa, you're the only one who knows your voice. Let's hear it. Come on, it's time to make some noise. So let's sing loud. We don't need to wait for a chance to celebrate. So let's sing loud. We don't need to wait for our time. So let's sing loud together, friends forever. Voices strong, we will rise together, help each other, sing our song. Whoa, 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 so let's sing loud. Sing loud. We don't need to wait for a chance to celebrate. So let's sing loud. We don't need to wait for our time. So let's sing loud. Let's sing loud. Let's sing loud.
All right. Well, our last piece today, an arrangement of Still, 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 which I'll tell you is one of my wife's favorite Christmas songs. This is for SAT a cappella choir. So I know you have a large holiday music collection. What should people know about this arrangement in particular?
Well, this was one one I wrote for that album I mentioned before, the album that my sister sang on. This recording is not them. This recording is a professional choir, but they wanted something. I think the perception out there is that holiday music is kind of something you throw together at the last minute. Like it's not what you really want to do as a choral director, but it's something that you're expected to do, right? Because the moms want to hear Christmas music, right? And so what we were trying to do with this was just create something that was a really serious piece of music, like and just show that you can have a holiday concert where you are stretching your choir and exercising all of those, advanced musical muscles. It doesn't have to be something that's just sort of thrown together at the last minute, right? And that goes back to the self-publishing thing too that we were talking about before. Like a lot of the time, the holiday music that's published does fall into that sort of, I call it the just add water category of music, right? Because that's what the majority of people are after. And, a difficult 8-part a cappella arrangement, which is what Still, Still, Still is, that doesn't necessarily sell as many copies as the 3-part, simple, repetitive thing. Nothing wrong with that type of music at all. But I think, like the fact that anyone can publish their music now creates more opportunities for this kind of thing. And so what I tend to go for with my holiday music is, choirs that are looking for something a little more, a little added challenge, not just sort of your basic, I don't know, because there's been I guess what I'm really trying to say is there's already so many versions of Still, Still, Still out there, right? There's already so many versions of every holiday piece. And so for me, when I arrange something like that, when I arrange a Still, Still, Still or a Jingle Bells or a Silent Night, like there has to be a compelling enough reason musically for me to do it. Like why should they sing my piece versus the 40 others that are out there, or the 100 others, or I'm sure in the case of Silent Night, thousands of arrangements out there. And so for me, it was figuring out like, what is that twist that I can put on it? And for me, it was just the way the piece just sort of unfolds and then develops into these sort of crunchier chords and then pulls back and then it builds into this, big moment. And like, I just felt like I had something to say with this one that made it worth doing, and made it worth performing.
Yeah. Well, it's a great arrangement. And I think our audience is in for a treat. So we're going to listen here to Still, Still, Still.
Ooh. Sweetly slumber, dream and dream of the joyous day to
All right. Well, Garrett, what are you working on now that you can tell us about? What sort of current projects do you have?
Well, we are right in the thick of show choir season. The summer is actually my busiest time as an arranger because everyone wants their music to be ready and waiting for them when they come back to school in August and September. So working on a lot of show choir. I do have a couple of original songs that are written for show choirs or with show choirs in mind that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And then I have a Christmas EP that's coming out to Apple, Spotify streamers here in the next couple of weeks. So check that out. And if you go to so breezetunes.com is sort of my show choir centric website. But then I also have holidaychoirmusic.com, which is just focused in on the holiday stuff. And then garrettbreeze.com is where you find everything else, I guess. So I know it's a little bit unusual to have three websites, but I think for me it made sense logistically to have them in separate places. So if you can remember any one of those addresses, there should be links to the others. So don't stress out about that. But yeah, definitely check out my music and check out those recordings when they come out, and also the podcast, Selling Sheet Music. If you're a composer or an arranger and you're trying to figure out how to do what I'm doing, how to get your music out there, even if you're somebody that's got a traditional publisher, we share lots of ideas on how to market your music and interview people in the industry. So it's a really sort of niche thing, but I find it really interesting.
Well, I agree. I think everyone should go check out the podcast. Like I said, I've listened to a couple episodes and I think it's really well done. And hey, listeners out there, as we are nearing the end of season 6 of Moveable Dough, you may have noticed the awesome new logo that I'm using this season. The logo looks great on a shirt, a mug, a sticker, a hoodie, or any number of other items. The design is available through TeePublic, and you can get there through my website, sdcompose.com/moveabledough, and click where it says merch. Let others know how much you enjoy the show. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for joining me today on Moveable Dough.
Thank you, Steve. This was a treat. Good to talk to you again.
You as well. My guest today was composer Garrett Breeze. If you have a recommendation for a future guest or an idea for the show, please email me at moveabledough@gmail.com. This is Steve Danielson. Keep the music moving.